Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. The series of one-day invitation-only executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We're pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use the code SECWEEK23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right, and for this interview, we're talking to Vadim Lyubashevsky, and he has joined us to talk about making the world quantum safe. He's a cryptographer in the security group at IBM Research Europe in Zurich. His research focus is on designing efficient cryptographic protocols based on the hardness of lattice problems, which is the area of research you want to be in if you want to help build quantum safe encryption, based on the quick reading I did before this interview. In fact, Vadim was involved with 3 of the 4 quantum safe standards accepted by NIST. Welcome to the show, Vadim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. Part of the prep I did is I watched most of a panel discussion where, great panel. You and Vince Cerf and Whitfield Diffie, and like it was just kind of this this incredible group of folks, and I learned a lot just from watching that.
Oh yeah, that was a really fun panel for me too. I really learned a lot from those guys. I mean, really perspective that is missing in everyday research. It's talking to these guys who invented the internet, the public key cryptography. So really, that was a nice panel to be on.
Yeah, and very listenable too. Like with all those folks on stage, it could have very easily been, just completely unintelligible to somebody like me who doesn't have a background or deep knowledge in cryptography. But hopefully that's what we're going to do here on this podcast as well, is kind of demystify some of what's going on with post quantum encryption, because I'm sure everybody tuning into this has, in our industry, in the security industry, has heard some form of, all encryption is going to be broken soon. So that's what we're going to dive into here. But first, maybe a bit on your background. Like, be interested to understand, like, how did you end up on that stage? With some of the RSA inventors. With do you have a strong background in math? What led you into cryptography?
No, I don't have a strong background in math at all. I think that's what kind of led me into more of a theoretical computer science about 20 years ago, and that's where you need to know a little bit of everything. Not You don't need to know too much of one thing. So a background in math, is a lot more than I know. So yeah, I started working on some cryptographic problems. Well, I mean, there was no quantum safe cryptography at that point. No one even cared about it. It was just some nice. This was around 2002. It was some nice theoretical problems, had some interesting math behind it. You could do some stuff, and we were just trying to, my advisor did something in the area, and we were trying to work on some open problems, and there were very few people working on it. It was definitely not a hot area. And then, we succeeded in doing something, and it was kind of fast. We said, this cryptography can be fast, and it has some really nice theoretical properties of security. And so that was nice, and maybe more people started looking at it. Then other researchers said, actually, this kind of cryptography can be used for something very exciting, fully homomorphic encryption, something you can't build, you couldn't build before. So that got more attention, and then it was fast, and it was very versatile, and kind of progressed in and it became maybe more mainstream in the cryptographic community, this lattice-based cryptography based on these hard problems. And then I think, I would say in 2010s, people started being aware of quantum computing. And they said, hey, maybe this quantum computing will come soon. I mean, no one was building them yet, but there was something in the air that this could come. And and I guess in 2015 or 16, that's when the NSA said, next, we are going to switch to quantum safe cryptography because it's coming soon, and that kind of got everyone rushing. And then NIST has declared the standardization competition, standardization effort. And yeah, so kind of it wasn't something that was spurred on in 2016. Someone said, let's do quantum safe cryptography, and people just started rushing around seeing what could be quantum safe or what could be interesting cryptography that's not based on problems that quantum computers can solve. But I mean, this was a research area that started a long time ago. It wasn't in the beginning meant to be something quantum safe. It was, had some other interesting properties, but it turns out that, yeah, it seems like it may actually be quantum safe. And because of that research we put in before, actually was ready to be a strong candidate for standardization. That's the short background of what happened. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And help me understand the whole process with NIST here, because I understand IBM isn't the only company submitting to NIST. There's quite a few, but somehow you guys ended up attached to 3 of the 4 that got selected. I noticed, and I guess it's normal for this process, but some of the submissions were broken, and I don't know, maybe this is a U.S. centric view. I'm not sure, but is NIST kind of the gold standard here? It seems like NSA is selecting separately, and there are some companies out there, like I noticed Amazon already, like some companies have already selected quantum safe. They've made their choices even before this vetting process has completed. So it seems interesting to me that they'd that they jump in already. But yeah, just help me understand, like, how does NIST influence what becomes kind of like an industry standard?
Yeah, that's it's just something that people agreed on. So one thing you need for cryptography is you need a lot of people to look at something and try to break it and fail. Unfortunately, cryptography is not one of these areas where it's not physics where you have an equation, you say, that's how gravity works, and therefore it will always work like this. We can't say, this is secure and there's nothing that can break it. We have to say, look, this mathematical problem people have tried solving for many years. They have failed. We're going to build our schemes that are as hard as this mathematical problem. Right, so this is how cryptography works, but you want that mathematical problem to be looked at by a lot of people, and you also want to make sure that these proofs are correct, that really, if you do break my scheme, you really will solve this mathematical problem. So what NIST has going for it is that somehow it is the de facto place where if they declare a competition, a lot of people will look at it. A lot of people will try to break the schemes there. So it is very widely, attended by cryptanalysts, by cryptographic designers. And so whatever comes out of there usually has a good record of being looked at by many people. And this is exactly what you want in cryptography. So all those companies, for example, you mentioned that rolled out their own quantum safe crypto before NIST even declared a standard. IBM was also one of them. We also put in the Kyber and dilithium before they were standardized into some of our products. That was just as a kind of proof of concept, saying, okay, we can, once something is standardized, doesn't matter what, we know how to put it. Because it turns out that that was a hard problem, putting something, kind of changing today's crypto with the new crypto. So it doesn't matter what the new crypto is, but just this change turns out to be one of these human problems, messy problems that needs to be solved. And lots of companies kind of went out and said, oh, look, once this declares a standard, we know how to do it. I mean, we were going to try with this algorithm, but if they pick something else, we'll pick that one. And I think eventually people will gravitate towards this standard just because it's very widely studied, and this is the prime time. If someone's going to try to break something, glory is in the NIST. I mean, breaking a NIST standard would be very, very good for a cryptanalyst.
Yeah. And sorry, Lee, did you have a question?
No, I was just reacting. Yeah, that would be quite a feather in the cryptanalyst's cap to break in this standard. I was reflecting, though, a while back, I'm talking to counterparts in Europe about standards. They sometimes get a little. They're not. They don't welcome this standards as the way we do it on this side of the pond. And I'm wondering, is that still true, or is that sort of behind us now?
So in a way, it is true. Like, for example, the French standardization body says, yeah, we're going to look at what NIST selected, but we also like this scheme. For example, the German BSI said, actually, we like these schemes. So they didn't choose the NIST standards, but they chose something else. But the interesting thing is the schemes they chose all came out of this NIST competition, right? So maybe the ones that NIST selected at the end, I mean, they're just as well studied as maybe because the NIST standardization process, it was like a sieve. It was sieving out the first round had 69 submissions, then maybe the next one 27, then 9. And so in the last round, all of those submissions got studied a lot. So whatever NIST picked doesn't mean that that pick was the most studied at that point. So all of those finalists were well studied. And so some organizations in Europe said, oh, okay, actually, we want to pick something else. Because they have their own opinions, and something that, and it's okay in a way, because those algorithms, like I said, during the competition were as well studied. But maybe now the NIST ones could be a little more studied, because again, NIST maybe has those standards kind of maybe a little more widespread. So yeah. But it's hard to say that the Europeans did something incorrectly just because NIST didn't pick it. It's okay. It's not a big deal. That everyone can kind of choose whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
It's well studied enough.
Right. So, well, and I guess the other part of the question from earlier is there something that IBM is doing differently that got IBM involved with so many of the, I don't know, is it fair to call them winners here? Is that, I don't know if it's a competition. It seems like obviously it's not going to be included if it's broken. But yeah, is there anything you guys are doing different in how you evaluate these and come up with these that led you to have 3 out of the 4?
Well, something we did, like I said, I was working in this area already for 20 years. And something that we did in the beginning, we said, look, we have to. I mean, this NIST thing is a team sport. So you pick a team, and you try to get the best implementers, the best designers, the best cryptanalysts. And the people we got in our group were quite good. I mean, they were known for, they had very varied skills that were very well respected in the community. We had, like I said, I was working on design of the scheme since my PhD. Our cryptanalyst who was working on cryptanalysis since his PhD. We had a person who was working on the implementations for a long time. So we had a very strong team in those submissions. So I would say that, if anything, that was, and it wasn't just an IBM team, of course. I mean, there was lots of academic institutions involved as well, and so some companies too. So I think the strength of the team, and we were able to dot the I's and cross the T's of the algorithms that were already developed, and yeah, I think there was some trust that maybe we did it well, and but it's hard to say that there was a huge chasm between our submission and something else. I mean, all these lattice-based submissions were fairly similar. You could have picked something else at the end. So, yeah, it's more of submitters themselves. I mean, yeah, we kind of took it to the finish line, but the work was already done a long time before this competition even started.
So next, I want to kind of pivot to talking more about the basics before we dive more into the different standards that were selected here. And so when we say quantum computers will break encryption, I want to kind of break this down into what quantum computers, and what kind of timeline we're talking about with this happening, what we mean when we say break, and specifically what we mean when we say encryption. And starting with that first one from our conversation with Kayla just before this, it sounds like quantum computing is probably still quite a ways out from building any kind of tool that can brute force, say, RSA encryption, for example, today. So is there any, I know it's just going to be a guess, but is there any kind of agreed upon time frame that we're looking at here? Are we looking at 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years?
Look, I have no idea, right? I mean, people post these predictions. They say, look, 7 years with 5% probability, 10 years with 20% probability. I'm not quite sure, it's impossible to tell. They did a survey of all the quantum, quantum physicists who are building quantum computers. It's all over the place, right? So there's no information that I can add. So in that sense, I think it was very good what the NSA did, and they just put a timeline and they said all cryptography must be quantum safe by 2033, and it has to start already by 2030. So it's kind of, you just stop guessing when it's going to be. All cryptography, that the U.S. Government uses. So stop guessing when the quantum computer will be built, and just we're telling you when to use cryptography, and that's quantum safe. And the reason is, of course, I guess everyone has heard of this. These harvest and decrypt attacks. So if I store all the encryption now, it's not quantum safe. I can't do anything with it, but once quantum computers come about and I have access to it, I can decrypt everything. So maybe if your secrets are, still interesting in 15 years, you want to start using a quantum safe encryption now. And of course, the time to transition is also something that is not negligible. It could take a good 10 years for transitioning our systems to take out the classical crypto and put in the quantum safe.
Mm-hmm. And then the next bit I want to touch on is what we mean when we say break. With different kinds of cryptography, like if we're talking about password hashes, for example, there's different techniques to go about it. There's quicker ways of cracking somebody's password that don't require brute force. But in this case, are we talking about like the approach is trying all combinations? It's a brute force approach here. What do we mean when we say break? Like the theoretical program we're going to someday write for a quantum computer to render this encryption or to find the private key, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is actually a good question. I think break gets used a little too liberally.
Okay.
So for example, I think there's categories of like break and weaken. So there's really two algorithms that quantum computers know how to do. Maybe three, I don't know, but there's two main ones. So there's Grover's algorithm, which can search, but faster. So in the square root, so you have a list. So normally you would have to, if you want to find an element, you need on average to search half of them, for example, to find it. But with quantum computing, you can actually search the square root. Take square root of time to just find something in a list. So I would say that's called weaken, because you can still create hard problems. Okay, now it's faster, but it's still secure. So for example, people say, okay, AES 128, which should be 128-bit secure, meaning it should take 2 to the 128 time to break. With Grover's algorithm, very optimistically, it would be square root, so 2 to the 64. Well, 2 to the 64 is not very secure. But you can just increase, 250 instead of 128, use 256. Now the square root of that is 2 to the 128. And that's perfectly secure. So Grover's algorithm, I would say, if it really works in practice like it does in theory, which people aren't quite sure about in these cryptographic primitives, I would say it weakens things like AES and SHA. Whereas there's another class of algorithms. This is called Shor's algorithm, and it's not a very generic algorithm. So Grover's is very generic, right? And give any list, square root of time can find an element in it. Shor's, solves very specific problems, but it actually gives you an exponential speed up. So whereas before, solving whatever discrete log problems was exponentially hard, Shor's algorithm is not going to be square root. It's actually going to be polynomial. So we really go down from something that's, impossible to break to something that is basically almost as easy to break as it is, so almost as easy to decrypt as it is to encrypt. And you can't have something like that. You need this gap to be kind of asymptotically increasing or exponentially, or at least super polynomially. You cannot have this gap be small. So I would say that if an algorithm, says, look, asymptotic, this gap is going to be small between encryption and decryption, that's broken. Anything else, I would say it's weakened. It could be significant. There's definitely different variations of weakened, but weakened. So what quantum computing does, this Shor's algorithm, it actually breaks these mathematical problems which we thought were hard, like factoring, discrete log. And these happen to be the problems upon which cryptography was built, because they had this very nice structure, and which made for very efficient cryptography, very elegant cryptography. But unfortunately, this same structure is exactly something that Shor's algorithm latches onto in order to find a quicker algorithm. So the quantum safe algorithms, quantum safe cryptographic schemes, don't really have very nice algebraic structure. They're more kind of combinatorial problems. So quantum algorithms, the Shor's algorithm doesn't seem to work, and people have not come up with any better ideas than kind of classical attacks using quantum computers. So quantum computers don't seem to help attacking these new mathematical problems.
Yeah, and you've dived into the final question here a bit already, which is when we say, so now we know we should say quantum computers at some point, we don't know when, could break or weaken encryption. And the final bit is what encryption are we talking about here? What encryption needs to be replaced and what does not need to be replaced?
So there's two types of encryption. There's symmetric encryption and public key encryption. So symmetric key encryption, two parties communicate, but they have the same key. They already shared some key. And this is things like AES, and that quantum computers weaken it. Although according to some people, maybe not even, right? Because the quantum resources needed to run Grover's algorithm may be too much to even break AES 128. But let's say they weaken it. But public key encryption, this is something that was invented in the 1970s. This was the Diffie-Hellman famous paper. They allow two parties who have never met to be able to exchange information securely. And this usually requires having some mathematical structure in order to be able to do this type of communication. And this is what quantum computers will break. So actually on the internet, both of these are used. So when we first establish a connection, we exchange a secret key using public key cryptography. And then we use symmetric key cryptography using this secret key. So this first step, where two people have never met, and they have to communicate securely, but they have to exchange just a bit of secret information. This is the thing that quantum computers break, and this is what NIST wanted a replacement for.
Okay, yeah. So, and as you said about symmetric encryption, like AES 128, in cases where it's just weakened, you just increase the key size, right? Whereas in this other case, you've got to replace the algorithm entirely, which is what you guys are building.
Exactly. Because it was weakened, but just a little bit, so no problem. But the other one is complete. It's hopeless. You cannot do anything. You have to replace. Mm-hmm.
Lee, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. So, I mean, we keep, I'm very familiar with the efforts to prioritize critical systems that have cryptography and replace them. Although the way they're doing the data calls is really horrible. For example, they say you want your most critical, your high value assets, and also anything that's using RSA encryption or ECDH or other of those, the stuff that's like in every web browser and every web server delivering it. And so that's quite the opposite of prioritizing to critical systems. So enough of the rant. My thinking is, do you have any insights on when post-quantum will actually be a product that somebody could actually implement? Because it feels like that's a ways off.
No, so it really depends. So, for example, IBM already has these algorithms in their Z16, the server. And I think even before that, there were companies like Google, Amazon, like you said, they were running experiments, putting in these quantum safe protocols for communication. I think Firefox now either has or had just an experiment, or maybe Fiber even already the standard that was selected. So for certain things, it's actually not so hard to make them quantum safe, especially if you're starting from the beginning. I think the hard part is if you already have some product running and some service running or some system, and you say, okay, now I have to make it quantum safe. Well, now you have to find. Unfortunately, it seems like you have to find all the places where cryptography is used, and it's not as plug and play as one would hope or one would assume. And so this is going to be the hard part. So building new systems, I think, is actually not so bad, and people have done it. Transitioning old legacy, yeah, that's difficult, and this is what a lot of IBM clients are trying to do, and this is what IBM is helping with. This could take time, but luckily NSA said U.S. government 2033. That's when it's going to happen. So there's no question.
But yeah, I mentioned AWS, and I think it was 2019. You could use Kyber with AWS KMS. They supported for TLS specifically.
Maybe. Could be.
Yeah. There, I'm hoping in a post-quantum world we can get some of the sanity back. For example, I've dealt with situations where, you have to have a minimum of this level of security implemented on the system, but at the same time, the requirement is to disable all others. Which sounds good at the surface, but sometimes that disablement. My favorite example is turning on FIPS mode in Microsoft Windows can be a really bad thing, or in Linux systems, because there's a lot of things that'll break, even though you've got the algorithms there. I'm hoping that we see more sanity in the future as we come to, putting in post-quantum, particularly as we're going to need backward compatibility, because not everybody's moving at once. Do you think that I'll get my wish, or do you think I'm kind of dreaming?
Well, of course, it has nothing to do with quantum safe.
It's not a technical problem,
right?
is it?
The fact that we're going to be redoing all these systems, maybe, because a lot of them are just things we have from the 80s, and just people kept trying to modify them, adding stuff on, something that makes very little sense. Like limiting the packet sizes to something very artificially small, because we never thought we would need keys that would be larger than 128 bits. Yeah, so things like these legacy things, which still around, that we will have to replace. Yeah, there is hope that it will be done kind of better. Because I guess in the 80s, it was still not really even a research field. It was still something super brand new. I guess people had no idea where they were going with it. But now it's a real discipline, and people say, look, this should be done right. And I'm hoping that if we redo everything because of quantum safe cryptography, we will redo the annoying things that annoy you as well.
Yeah, so something Lee mentioned, that I saw quite a bit when I was researching implementations that have already gone in. There's a lot of reference to using hybrid algorithms, and I didn't quite understand what they meant by hybrid algorithms. I don't know if they're encrypting using two different algorithms, or if this is an algorithm where they're somehow mixing post-quantum and pre. So I don't know if you can shed some insight on that, Vadim.
Yeah, so I think in the context of quantum safe cryptography, what they probably mean is using a known algorithm, for example, like elliptic curve discrete log for encryption, and something new, Kyber, for example. So the advantage of that is that, well, we have studied these other algorithms that we've been using right now for longer. And whereas these quantum safe algorithms, while we've been studying them for several decades as well, they are not, they haven't been as widely used, so maybe not as big a target as the things that are currently used. And therefore, you don't want to make things weaker. So for now, let's encrypt them with both algorithms. So at least classically, at least with a classical computer, we're still secure. Against quantum computers, of course, elliptic curve cryptography is useless. But at least for now, we're going to still be as safe as we are. So this is the point of hybrid mode. And I think most people think it's a good idea. The NSA said it's not necessary. They have a lot of faith in lattice cryptography, possibly because they've been studying it for a while, for a long time themselves. I would guess that must be the reason they have so much faith in it, because they usually, I think, they pick a problem, then they put a lot of resources into it, and maybe lattice cryptography was that thing that they put a lot of resources in, and they have confidence in it. But I think for the rest of the world who maybe is not as familiar with lattice cryptography, they feel safer using hybrid mode, and this is okay.
Okay.
You've mentioned NSA a couple of times, which made me think of some of their other crypto, like Suite B and stuff. Have they talked about that type of where it sits?
Yeah. So they're saying, I mean, that was what they announced in 2015, that if you haven't yet upgraded to Suite B, don't, and upgrade to the quantum safe cryptography once it comes out after the NIST competition.
Yeah. Okay. And I know there's some other algorithms that I'm not sure what the common terms for them are that they have. It'll be interesting. You'll just have to watch the space and see what comes out. I'm expecting firmware updates will be a thing.
Yeah, and to that point, it seems like everything is lattice based. But even after we get the selection, the NIST standards in place, France chooses their standards, RSA or NSA chooses their standards. Are folks still going to be working on this problem, trying to come up with new ones? And are there any non-lattice based solutions that anybody's working on?
Yes. So I think people are definitely still working on it. So there are some code-based solutions. This is one. A code-based solution is something that Germany has chosen. For encryption, there was also this other field called isogeny, and it was very promising. But the one candidate that everyone submitted was broken, I don't know, a few months ago. So this was a bit of a shock. But I guess happens. But it's still an active research area, because you can do something else. And so with encryption, that's none of that. And with digital signatures, which is another thing that NIST wanted, there you could have even more different assumptions. You could have these multivariate assumption about solving some multivariate system of equations. And that has different trade-offs over lattices. And then there's another scheme that has other trade-offs. And even within the lattice scheme themselves, there's different trade-offs. So kind of with encryption, I think lattices are the best of all worlds. With digital signatures, there's room for, let's say, other assumptions, even if lattices don't get broken. So with encryption, I would say that the other assumptions for now, and people will keep working on it, but really it's if lattices don't get broken, I think it's going to be lattices. For digital signatures, it could be different things for different situations. And people are going to keep working on this. This is, because you never know if somebody comes up with another quantum algorithm and it breaks some schemes we have, like lattices and codes, and now you need something else. So, yeah, so this is definitely still a very active area of research.
Okay. Yeah, and that's that makes sense. Makes sense. And you mentioned digital signature algorithms, and like the different types of standards that have come in here. And so maybe before we wrap here, let's talk about that a little bit, because and also I'm kind of curious if the Kyber and dilithium names with crystals are those sci-fi references intentionally, or is that coincidence?
Well, crystals actually stands for something, cryptographic suite of algebraic lattices, and then I mean, Peter Schwabe was on the team. He was a big Star Wars fan, so he said Kyber should be the crystal we choose, and because it starts with K, because encryption is a key encapsulation, and then digital signature. So he wanted a crystal with D. So it's kind of mixed Star Trek into it. Hopefully, doesn't offend too many people. But
very important we put that to rest, and we make sure that that's well known.
we know that they're not from the same show. We
Okay. and of these, so there's crystals, Kyber. So maybe talk a little bit, crystals, dilithium, there's Falcon, and then there's, I assume you'd say Sphinx, like the
Sphinx Plus,
Egyptian Sphinx. Maybe let's talk a little bit about why these four were chosen and what these four can be used for.
Yeah. So Kyber is the only encryption scheme or key encapsulation that was chosen. So that's really for encryption, for secrecy. The other three are digital signature schemes, and they are for proving authenticity. So to prove that, hey, it really is me talking. And the reason that they chose only one encryption and three digital signatures is kind of what I alluded to before, that for encryption, it really seems like lattices are the thing to offer the best of all worlds. Now, there's still a kind of a round 4 happening where they will pick the backup algorithms to standardize for encryption. So there's some code-based algorithms there. But I think they felt that at this point, it really makes sense to just, focus on Kyber. NIST did, and the NSA also was happy with that. For digital signatures, there isn't, the best of all worlds solution. So dilithium was very easy to implement, but produces slightly larger signatures and public keys. And being easy to implement is something important. Now, Falcon is more efficient in terms of output sizes, but it requires floating point arithmetic. Also, you can get rid of it. People have gotten rid of it now in similar schemes, but you still have to, pick random values from a weird Gaussian distribution, whereas we're only used to picking random numbers, uniformly random numbers. So picking from a different distribution is not so trivial, especially on constrained devices. So NIST said, okay, in some scenarios, maybe when you use Falcon, if you really can't afford the large, somewhat large key sizes and signatures of dilithium. And then the last one is Sphinx. So that one has the very nice advantage. Digital signatures can do this, encryption cannot, is that you actually don't need a mathematical assumption to build a digital signature scheme. You can actually do it from just based on the hardness of something like SHA-3, so hash functions. So we all believe quantum computers do not break hash functions. They at worst weaken them. So this signature scheme is as secure as hash functions. So that's a very strong security guarantee. The problem is it is a lot less efficient, maybe orders of magnitude less efficient than other schemes. So it simply cannot be run on some constrained devices, not as universal. So I think what NIST said is that we think dilithium is universal, easy to implement, kind of small enough. Falcon, okay, some special cases. Sphinx in other special cases where you don't need to be efficient, but you really need strong security guarantees. And I think all three will find applications. And now NIST wants even more signature schemes. They start yet another round of competition to get another signature scheme, maybe that's based on multivariate, solving multivariate equations. So yeah, whereas like I said, for encryption, we kind of know what to do unless lattices get broken. For digital signatures, we do not have the best of all worlds, and it may not even exist. So that's why NIST wants a few different examples, and that's why they didn't call it a competition, because there could be many winners.
Right. Well, it makes sense. So different options for different use cases and needs.
I was wondering if you ever thought of coming up with an algorithm yourself.
What do you mean?
Coming up with an encryption or signing algorithm to throw on the table to see if you could do something that wouldn't be broken, or is that just whatever? I was just thinking. You do a lot of work in cryptoanalyst, and I just wondered if you ever think.
No. I'm not a cryptanalyst. I'm actually I design cryptographic schemes. So dilithium came out of almost my PhD, the core of it, and Kyber, something we worked on during my postdoc, at least the core of it. So yeah, I'm not a cryptanalyst at all. I design cryptographic schemes and hope they don't get broken.
Right. So not only yes, but I've been there, done that. Very cool. Sorry to underestimate you.
No, you just thought I did cryptanalysis. Not bad at all, but I don't do.
No. Yeah.
In case that wasn't clear from the beginning, Vadim's name is on 3 of the 4 that were selected by NIST.
I wasn't paying attention. That's my bad, not his. And I'm sorry about that.
I'm trying to nicely not call you out here, Lee, for not listening.
And I'm throwing myself under the bus because I'm embarrassed. It's okay. It's all good. You guys are very kind.
All right. Well, I think, Vadim, you've answered all the questions I had today. I think I've got a much clearer understanding of kind of the urgency here and what's impacted. So for me, this has answered a lot of questions. I hope it's answered a lot of questions for our audience as well. Anything, and again, just to mention, in the show notes, we've got several links if people want to learn more about these different quantum safe standards. And Vadim, anything you want to leave us with before we wrap?
No, I think you covered everything. I would say, the most important thing now is people to look at these schemes. Cryptanalysis is very important for us to gain confidence in them, so that we are not kind of scared to migrate. One of the reasons people say, we don't want to migrate yet is like, are we sure they're secure? Well, you have to have people look at these algorithms, and in this way, that this will kind of this will hasten the migration process, which should really start now if we want to be ready by 2033.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's one of my takeaways here is that it's not so much is it secure or not, it's how hard have we hit it, right? Like how closely have we examined it and tried to break it?
Oh, yeah, I suppose, but things can be secure or not secure, so it's not, it's not if something is secure and a lot of people look at it, it's not going to become less secure. It's just we don't
Right.
know if to call it secure. Yeah, gaining confidence is the most important thing. Cryptography.
Gotcha. Well, Vadim, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been a great conversation.
Pleasure. Enjoyed answering the questions.
All right. And stick with us. We'll be right back in a few minutes with another interview with Matt Johansson.